Have you ever known a person with the gift of prophecy? Did they do a good job wrapping the gift in the way of love? Look for strengthening, encouragement, and comfort, verse 3, but also consider verses 24 and 25. Verses 22 through 25 are a bit difficult to interpret. Read them carefully. It may be helpful to read the verses understanding that Paul is summarizing. Tongues have a place, but prophecy in church is emphasized. 1 Corinthians 14:22 through 25. Therefore other languages are a sign, not to those who believe, but to the unbelieving. But prophesying is for a sign, not to the unbelieving, but to those who believe. If therefore the whole assembly is assembled together and all speak with other languages, and unlearned or unbelieving people come in, won't they say you are crazy? But if all prophesying and someone unbelieving or unlearned comes in, he is reproved by all, and he is judged by all, and thus the secrets of his heart are revealed. So he will fall down on his face and worship God, declaring that God is among you indeed. In verse 26, Paul moves on to the specifics of orderly worship. The whole congregation should be engaged. Everyone has something. The use of tongues is fine, as long as there is interpretation. 1 Corinthians 14:26 through 28. What is it then, brothers? When you come together, each one of you has a psalm, has a teaching, has a revelation, has another language, has an interpretation. Let all things be done to build each other up. If any man speaks in another language, let it be 2 or at the most 3, and in turn, let one interpret. But if there is no interpreter, let him keep silent in the assembly, and let him speak to himself and to God. Prophets should speak 2 or 3 prophetic revelations. Notice the others should weigh carefully or discriminate what is said. I consider the others to be the other prophets. Sure, the elders would need to chime in if there was error being taught, but mainly there is to be self-check going on among the prophets. 1 Corinthians 14:29 through 31. Let the prophets speak, 2 or 3, and let the others discern. But if a revelation is made to another sitting by, let the first keep silent. For you all can prophesy one by one, that all may learn, and all may be exhorted. There is judgment ongoing by those gifted and trained to do so. Remember this for the next section. 1 Corinthians 14:32 through 33. The spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets, for God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the assemblies of the saints. Women are to remain silent. 1 Corinthians 14:34. Let your wives keep silent in the assemblies, for it has not been permitted for them to speak, but let them be in subjection, as the law also says. That is the way of it in all the congregations of the saints. Hard to make it a cultural thing. The word for silent here means absolute quiet. But in chapter 11, Paul wrote of women praying and giving prophetic utterance. The context sure seems to involve community worship. Is Paul contradicting himself? No. We see once again the roles of men and women. The role of women in the church or the home is not a role of leadership or judgment. See Genesis 3:16. Notice the context. Paul is speaking about the prophets in verse 29. 1 Corinthians 14:29. Let the prophets speak, 2 or 3, and let the others discern. He speaks of weighing, judging of the prophetic revelation in verse 30. 1 Corinthians 14:30. But if a revelation is made to another sitting by, let the first keep silent. He brings up women starting in verse 33. 1 Corinthians 14:33. For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the assemblies of the saints. He continues with prophets in verse 37. 1 Corinthians 14:37. If any man thinks himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him recognize the things which I write to you, that they are the commandments of the Lord. Women are to remain silent when it comes to weighing, judging prophetic revelation. They can bring up and address any questions with their own husbands at home. 1 Corinthians 14:35. If they desire to learn anything, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to chatter in the assembly. A woman may be gifted in prophecy, and a revelation may come through her. but she is to remain silent with regard to carefully weighing what has been said prophetically. 1 Corinthians 14:36. What? Was it from you that the word of God went out, or did it come to you alone? That is not a woman's role, as it is not a role of submission. All of this is part of an orderly process. 1 Corinthians 14:38. But if anyone is ignorant, let him be ignorant. Therefore, brothers, desire earnestly to prophesy, and don't forbid speaking with other languages. Let all things be done decently and in order. 1 Corinthians 14, Lesson 14, The End.